Now I can formally kick things off by welcoming you to the 18th Annual Growing Online Learning Conference. The theme for the 2026 conference is Designing for Access, OER and the Future of Online Learning. We hope that this year's conference offered you ideas and strategies for developing a culture for open education and engaging in OER development and implementation. I'm Ellen Ivanchak at Illinois Valley Community College, and thank you for being here today. ILCO would like to thank Heartland Community College for providing the web conferencing platform for use in this year's conference. Please note that captioning is available for the conference sessions. Our schedule from the last 3 days is on the screen. It can also be found on the conference website at ilco.net under resources and events. And you can get there by going to ilco.net. The recordings of these presentations and handouts will be available at the conference site on ilco.net following the conference. If you have any questions, please contact Jeff Newell at jeff.newell@illinois.gov. A note for our participants, we ask everyone to stay muted when not speaking, and there will be a Q&A period at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker today. The presentation is partnering with the SIU Press to grow OER capacity for Illinois. Mark Poepsel, Associate Professor of Mass Communications at SIU-Edwardsville, is presenting. Mark is the solo author of 2 OER textbooks, the co-author of chapters in 3 other OER texts, one of the leads of the SIU-E's Faculty Incentive Program, and the recipient of multiple OER grants from the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries of Illinois and from the Midwest Higher Education Compact. He is currently collaborating with the SIU Press in Carbondale to try to find ways for OER creators to collaborate with university presses in what could be a groundbreaking partnership. Thank you for being here with us, Mark. So Mark, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can get started when you're ready.
All right, Ellen, thank you guys very much for having me here. As I get this set up, I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about OER. And Ellen, you can just thumbs up if you're looking at the full screen, not the preview screen, right? Okay, so we got it set up right. And so I am building to a place where we can talk about working with the SIU Press to increase capacity for open educational resources development across the state. But I also want to talk about my personal experience working in the field of OER for more than a decade now. And I think that we have plenty of time for questions built in at the end. But if there's something that you really want to ask about, I'm not going to be offended if you unmute and just ask away. This is definitely for everyone's, for the sake of collaboration, for everyone's knowledge. So this specific presentation I'm calling Experiences with OER from Individual Interest to Statewide Capacity Building. And so you're going to get my personal OER story for a little bit, and then we'll talk about my university's open education journey and talk about how that kind of culminated in our faculty incentive program and some things, some like real pride points that we have after having that in place for a couple of years. And then I want to talk about getting involved in statewide capacity building, which leads to the partnership with SIU Press, which is out of Carbondale, and I am in Edwardsville, so a couple hours away. I'm currently in like the St. Louis metro area, but obviously we're part of the SIU system here at SIUE. So, okay, so it starts with an underpaid assistant professor. This is the reason that I got interested initially in working on OER. In 2014, SIUE had an open educational resources experiment where they basically gave us a small stipend and they gave all the students in your class an iPad mini. And they said, all you got to do to earn this stipend is adopt some type of open educational resource. So something published under a Creative Commons license or in the public domain. I'm sure you all know the definitions of OER right now, but my thing was more textbook based rather than software, and it wasn't based on stuff that I could find under public domain. It was really about developing my own kind of, I would say, shorter version of an intro to mass comm text for a very particular freshman seminar course that also had library skills and stuff built in. So I had a lot of freedom to create whatever I wanted. I worked with instructional designers and I built a course and really learned what open educational resources are and fell in love with the ideas of open pedagogy, of obviously developing knowledge for the good of all and collaborating with students in some cases to iteratively work on this text and make it better after a few semesters. And yes, it came with a stipend. And so that was what led me to work on media, society, culture, and you. And I felt like I had to call it that because every other textbook in this area is called media, society, and culture in some way, shape, or form. And so I wanted to highlight the students' ability to produce their own works and to think about social media and their role as social media consumers and sharers and retweeters of factual information and misinformation. And this was a pretty good introductory textbook, which is now pretty outdated because it was published almost 12 years ago. This is how it looks on the Apple iBooks platform. And so for a while, I thought that was going to be it. I thought I was going to be somebody who took a little stipend and learned about OER and really enjoyed it. But it was really just helping, contribute to this course, which actually after a few more semesters, I didn't teach anymore because we went to a different model for our freshman seminar orientation type courses. But I was really interested in journalism entrepreneurship and in cutting edge mass communication and journalism research and teaching around this area of uh, I would say entrepreneurial media. So I was attending journalism pre-conferences and mini conferences trying to find out what people were teaching and doing. And I guess I became known as someone who was into OER, and I got invited to develop a chapter for media innovation and entrepreneurship, which you can see there, which we put out in 2017. And that for me was one of the best academic experiences of my life. I got to collaborate with these other authors. I am in this collection of authors. It's just without a beard and 12 years ago, so I look a little younger. But that's me, like, third from the bottom. It was a really cool group of collaborators, and it made me feel like this is a great opportunity to engage with people who knew a lot about their specific areas. And my particular chapter was on pitching, which I felt I had some background in, at least constantly pitching news stories as a broadcast journalist. So yeah, I was really excited to get volunteered to work on this, to contribute a chapter in 2017. And then subsequently, media innovation entrepreneurship was updated in 2018, 2019, 2020. Then we had the pandemic. It could have ended then. My OER journey might have ended with, getting to work on one chapter for that text. I should say that the management of that text was by the Rebus community. And so having the project management in place was a great experience and not the same experience that I've had with other OER projects. And that factors into kind of the rest of the story. So once again, it could have ended then. It could have ended in 2017 through 2020 with the minor revisions of media innovation entrepreneurship. But in 2021, we had a near financial collapse of our textbook service. At SIUE, students pay per credit hour fee for access to textbooks, which are run out of our textbook service office. And it's kind of hard to tell this story without getting into a ton of details, so I'll do my best. Textbook service is managed financially out of student affairs. When you run a huge deficit in student affairs and there's no more money to pull from anywhere, they pulled from academic affairs and basically took a lot of money that might have otherwise gone to faculty projects or incentives or travel. And we sort of balanced the budget by robbing Peter to pay Paul. Um, like what Illinois institution has never done that? But so it put our administration back on the OER train and really interested in using OER for cost savings. So if you've been listening to OER presentations for 3 days, a couple times a day, you will have definitely heard OER can be open educational resources in textbooks and course software can be a big savings, right? And so we were again voluntold to join a group, and we were sent to the AAC&U Institute on OER. And so we spent about 6 months learning more about how open educational resources are developed and how faculty are incentivized to use them in institutions across the country. And so we came out of there with this sort of obvious directive to create a faculty incentive program. And the website for that is on the bottom left of this screen. And I actually helped write that website and get it published. So we have a landing page and a kind of somewhat permanent space for our faculty incentive program to share the information. And at the top left is the administrator who volunteered me for this. And it's my former department chair. So you cannot say no to a former department chair who is trying to save textbook service and keep the university in the black. And that was Elsa's doing, right? So our faculty incentive program is now in its third year. We've spent just under 50,000 on incentives and saved over $1 million in textbook and courseware costs. That is not unusual, actually, for places that start faculty incentive programs in OER. There's usually a pretty good return on the investment. And if you were to Google like state by state, different states that incorporated or that began incentives for adopting or remixing OER. They're often talking about the millions of dollars in savings across the whole state or across the whole community college district or what have you from introducing these efforts because it saves students tons of money on textbooks, and eliminating course software costs is actually the fastest way to save the most. Some of our biggest savings, and the reason that SIUE is even over $1 million in savings is because of a couple of courseware offerings that we were able to replace with open educational resource options, right? I've also been part of bringing in more than $150,000 in external OER textbook development grants. So one of them is mine. It's for a media writing textbook. The other one is this Professor Chayagopalan, who's doing a text in epidemiology. But I mean, details aside, that is sort of an impressive number when you're going up for promotion and tenure to say you've brought in more than $100,000 in collaborative grant monies for helping to keep textbooks affordable for students. So then now we're in this stage where a lot of the early adopters and the people with projects kind of ready to go, or those who are interested in innovating and trying new things, have all taken part in our faculty incentive program, and we're trying to figure out what to do next, how to keep the momentum going. It's not the best political, social, economic climate for funding higher education in general, much less incentives to help save students money from the textbook publishers, right? So we're in this state now where some of the interest has waned, and some of the conditions on the national level are not nearly as good as they could or should be. So we're talking now about how might we take these lessons and enhance things within the state of Illinois, which is still relatively supportive of these efforts and, still interested in educating students in affordable ways. A lot of my students at SIU-Edwardsville transfer from community college, right? I have a good working relationship actually with Lewis and Clark Community College faculty as part of a campus to community committee here in Edwardsville. And so we're always talking about ways of encouraging students to get their education and to do it in a way that's affordable. I want to keep the dream of open pedagogy alive and of collaborating with students to build knowledge and to disseminate knowledge in open educational platforms where it's available for all. And so, we have all these questions where, all right, things are getting tougher, people are losing interest, but how can we grow it anyway? How can we sort of build our way out of our current challenges. And we were also tasked with finding partners in the SIU system, just as kind of a quirk of the SIU, of the relationship between SIU-Carbondale and SIU-Edwardsville, which I'm not going to get into it, but it hasn't always been the best, but there are a lot of reasons for us to collaborate, and this is a good one that we can work on. So I was encouraged to partner with SIU Press at about the same time that we got the SIU system involved in something called Doers. Doers is not on the slide deck. It's not the most exciting thing, but it's spelled DOERS as you would expect. And this is a group of system level folks who are interested in supporting OER and sharing data about the cost savings and some of the other support efforts that you might put in, right? And so when we joined Doers with Carbondale as a partner, I was also encouraged to reach out to SIU Press and see if they had any interest in working on OER. And they did. They were pretty excited about it. And so I became pretty excited about trying to figure out how to partner with SIU Press. And I'm talking to Amy Etchison, who is the director over there, and I'm saying, what if you guys operated like the Rebus community? um, who were so helpful in coordinating the media innovation entrepreneurship text. What if you were project managers? Can we engage OER with the OER development, remixing, and adoption with the sort of rigorous institutional approach of a classic university press? And might we invite more people or encourage more people to develop OER if they had the SIU Press imprint behind it, if they had the quote unquote real publishing experience? It might encourage more people to get more deeply involved with OER remixing and creation. And so we thought about what SIU Press might do, but these are all maybes. These are all big questions about what we would like to see if it's possible. Could they put out calls for proposals, bring authors together? Like if you have a couple of different faculty and a couple different campuses with half of an idea for a text, could they be brought together and could we look for funding for them to develop their book or their software? And they would apply editorial review, peer review, copy editing, accessibility efforts that otherwise you have to sort of piece together on your own campus with whatever resources are available. So this could be more of a hub for statewide OER collaboration. And it would be somewhat groundbreaking because not every state does it this way. And there are going to be some hurdles because the SIU Press is set up to publish books, and they have a really clear-cut process for publishing paper books, right? Hardback books and paperback books. So navigating the transition to digital is something that they're kind of going through. But luckily, I have a background in journalism, and so navigating digital disruption is kind of in my professional academic DNA. So could be a great partnership, not just for SIUE and Carbondale, but for the region. And you're invited. You guys, as educators in Illinois, can attend our mini conference. We have a dinner March 24th. I want to sell the dinner as a very attractive reason to come so you can stay overnight. We do have funding from Midwest Higher Education Compact. Depending on how many are interested, it might become first come, first served. But we're inviting people to a welcome dinner on March 24th and a conference that runs from 8:30 to 3:30 on March 25th at SIUE. So this is Edwardsville, Metro East St. Louis. And the registration form is there, and I can share the link with you again in the chat. But yeah, this is supported by the Midwest Higher Education Compact, which, if you don't know, has supported OER in states all around the Midwest for almost decades now, definitely for a decade and a half. So that's my presentation. I want to thank you for your attention. And that's my contact info. My name is Mark Poepsel. So let me stop the share and see if people are still there. Ellen, were we able to hear everything?
Yes, very well.
All right, good.
So yeah, anybody wants to share questions, you can unmute yourself or put them in the chat.
I do not see the chat blown up with a bunch of questions, so let's hope people have some things. That's the kind of thing where you time it for a half hour at home because you're, going through the paces and then get a little excited to present and get it done in 20 minutes. So we've got plenty of opportunity for questions. concerns, let me know.
You want to share the link to the conference in the chat? Oh, there it is.
You're welcome. It's a lot to take in, and I know from teaching on Zoom, sometimes you got to give people a second to, I don't know, let it sink in and come up with a question or two. You guys could tell me, what have you learned about OER in the other 5 sessions? Trying to wrap this up with a call to action and an opportunity to get involved and do something. But have you enjoyed learning about OER? I imagine most people are familiar with the term, but maybe not, you know.
Hi,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Mary Claire. I'm at Oakton College in Des Plaines, Illinois. And anyway, I'm the instructional designer there, and I've taught um, online and traditional face-to-face courses for years. And I'm helping our math department construct some new courses and some new templates for basic math. And I was really intrigued by the Open Math site that was introduced in today's earlier session.
Yeah.
And so I intend to explore that and kind of figure out how to use it a bit on my own. And then I'd like to introduce my faculty members to the site and to possibly consider using it for their courses. And maybe not so much in a traditional course, but eventually when these courses matriculate to a completely 100% online format, I think that will be very valuable information and resources to have in their back pocket. So thanks.
Yeah, with the growth of online education, especially during pandemic years, there were people who, so I guess, I didn't want to tell like the full story. I didn't know how much of my bio you guys wanted, but the OER, the Media Society and Culture text, I didn't just sort of leave it on Apple's iBooks. I circled back to it after working with Rebus Community on that media innovation text, and they helped me update it, take out things that were copyright protected because I had jammed some academic PDFs into it for my students' use. But then, of course, you can't do that if you're publishing it as Creative Commons, if there's anything proprietary in there. And so we went through the whole text, copy edited it, took out anything that was that we didn't have the rights to publish under a Creative Commons by license. So the CC by license means free to use, free to remix. You just have to attribute me whenever you use it. So Media Society, Culture, and You became a Rebus community publication. Basically just on the coattails of that media innovation book. And that was a helpful piece. I needed a couple more points, so to speak, to get tenure, right? And so getting that through peer review and, demonstrating this was an open pedagogical work, that it wasn't, I'm going to put in massive quotation marks, just teaching, but was research oriented, was peer reviewed, was real important for me. And one of the things we've worked on in the faculty incentive program is getting more recognition for OER development and remixing and creation when people are trying to get promoted, right? So one thing that is sort of a truism in OER advocacy is that we always kind of assume introductory courses in math, English, business, most of the hard sciences, that there's probably an OER for that, but it doesn't always mean it's the exact thing for your math courses, the way they line up, the platforms they're taught on, the learning management systems that you use. But there's perceived to be a lot more stuff for gen ed courses than for like more esoteric 300 and 400 level courses or graduate courses or whatever. And there are so many things that aren't textbooks that are still OER, so many courseware packages that people are developing. And, AI is definitely uh, controversial, and I don't want to advocate for using it blindly, but there may be some ability to develop more courseware using AI tools that we can use to educate students. So I'm really glad that you spoke up and you're thinking about it. And if you were a faculty or if you were an instructional designer on our campus, I would say let's talk to faculty about, um, short term, just looking at it, looking into it, and long term, figuring out if adoption is what you want to do. And then how can you tell students that this is saving them money? We paid faculty simply to review OER in the first year of our faculty incentive program. And then we took that tier out because we had a lot of interest and we were more interested in facilitating remixing and like adoption, not just OER review. But I'm going to advocate for putting the OER review back into the hopper the next time that we review our tiers of faculty incentive funding because it's the way of getting a foot in the door. If faculty can get, a couple $100 to review an OER text and share it with colleagues in their department, that can be a real good starting point. So I think that's what you're speaking to. So we have somebody in the chat. This is Nicole Hancock who said, came in late. What I'm looking for in particular is what folks are using for building their OERs while making them ADA accessible. And so mine, I'll just start with personal experience and then we can talk maybe more broadly. But I had worked with the Rebus community, and there's always someone who's in your team or should be who checks for ADA compliance as you're building it. And so they're the Pressbooks, the Rebus community works with Pressbooks. Pressbooks is built on the WordPress platform, which has some baked in ADA accessibility tools. And then when I built a text, and so I would say, your main concerns, if it's, quote unquote, just text and photos, is that you have a proper headings so that a text to speech reader could read it, and you want alt text for all your images. And so I had people check on my work, but I actually did the alt text all on my own for the Pressbooks version and for the I wrote my most recent OER text on LibreTexts. And so LibreText is a little more, maybe it looks a little more like HTML than like a fun what you see is what you get interface. But LibreText works and it's very popular and it's obviously really well known and they have great dissemination tools. But for my purposes, for ADA compliance, I was able to include alt text and and make sure it was a compliant digital work in the LibreText platform. So are you looking for authoring tools? I would say whatever tool you use, just make sure that you're adding alt text to your graphics and images. Sometimes the most challenging things to incorporate in a text are infographics because there's so much information that's all presented visually, right? And it's not going to be seen by OCR necessarily. So you're going to need to go into the nitty-gritty of a diagram or of some other infographic and explain to your readers what all is going on here. So it takes time, but accessibility is essential, and it's like legally mandated and essential. So we're going to do it whether we're ready to do it, in the next 2 months or not. We're going to. So yeah, what questions do we have or comments? How does this fit in with the other presentations you all have been seeing? There have been, it looked like 5 other OER slots on the docket these past couple of days. How is this fitting in? Is it resonating with what others have said? Am I raising new things that I need to elaborate on? I'm curious how much people have heard of OER. Nobody has free time to just write a bunch of new textbooks, but if we put a handful of people together and if you saw the power of remixing from previous texts, it might be more appealing.
Hi, Mark. Could you talk a little bit about maybe a time in the past that you have remixed someone else's OER materials and sort of how you approached that?
Yeah. So I wrote a text called the OER Guide for Media Writing, which is, for my purposes, it's built for a 200 level mass communication course that covers a lot of different styles of writing. And so, roughly a third of that text is remixed from a strategic communications OER text. Um, and so it was when I pitched the grant, it was like, I'm going to take 5 chapters or the equivalent from this OER text, and I'm going to write 5 of my own. And now the text, as it's kind of as it actually put it into the classroom, um, it has 12 chapters. They're just new topics that we needed to address. Um, and that original text was published in like 55 little chapters. It was like, I don't know, it was just styled in a way for it to work, a couple of mini chapters per section in a given week in the course. And so the remixing of that meant stitching together different pieces, a fair amount of cutting and pasting, changing the citation style, and updating references in media to platforms that weren't really used anymore. That text talked about Twitter quite a bit, and like people don't use Twitter anymore. They use X, formerly known as Twitter. And so, it really depends on the field that you're in, how quickly it changes, what available OER texts there are. But to me, that would be like the hardest it gets is merging from multiple small chapters into one chapter on advertising or one chapter on PR and changing the citation style, boohoo, but that took a little bit of effort to take it out of APA style and give it footnotes. But the vast majority of people who remix OER texts, they just take modular pieces that just take, I'm going to chunk this chapter and this chapter, and I'm going to go to this book and I'm going to take this chapter and this chapter. My immediate, so that I would like to wrap up that thought by saying for most people, they'll pull however many chapters, 2 or 3 or 4 from different sources and then add a couple of their own. Maybe they write one, maybe a colleague writes one. Um, there are texts out there that took huge chunks of my media society culture text and worked it into an intro text that was more suited to that university, right? And so I have seen, you know, huge chunks, like maybe half to 2/3 of my intro text incorporated into other people's work. But they attributed it to me, and that's how OER works. So that's what it's for, I guess. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, it's almost never like it's almost never as challenging as what I was trying to do, but uh, with the media writing text, I wanted like one chapter per week, so I didn't want to just leave it in these like little sliced chapters or whatever. For other people, it might work fine. Um, but yeah, that's been my experience. Is remixing is um, very doable depending on the field.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
The areas where we had the biggest savings at SIU-Edwardsville related to our faculty incentive program were in, I want to say, interpersonal communication. So we had a speech and rhetoric department, which now for years it's called itself applied communications, but they had an interpersonal communications text and they had a speak like a public speaking text, and they found open education versions and eliminated some really expensive texts and pieces of courseware that way. And in our business school and then in some of our hard sciences, they've been able to replace, the courseware homework programs. And you just have to be careful because, if you're a faculty who's teaching 4 courses a semester, the courseware might be the thing that manages homework for you. So, I'm not advocating for just wholesale switching or for administrators to force OER on people. But there are some pretty cool, depending on your field, courseware options that that you can still integrate into your LMS. But if we saved $1 million at SIUE, maybe a quarter of that was from eliminating a handful of courseware options that were just really expensive semester over semester.
Was that savings to the student or to the university?
That savings was what kept textbook service from going under. And so, and it helped us from having to increase uh, textbook fees. So in a way, it's to the students, but it's indirect because they're still paying for um, textbook fees, which is one of the reasons why we have this sort of perverse incentive where we don't always necessarily want to label our courses as OER courses because students are going to pay per credit hour for textbook fees, and then on the whole, we're going to try to save them money by adopting OER. Um, and textbook service is still on our campus something that's sort of baked into the DNA of the institution. It's been around pretty much as long as we've been a college, since the late 1950s. But it basically just means over time, over 2 or 3 or 4 years, students on average save money. Textbook publishers are trying to move away from letting us hold on to physical textbooks. They're trying to make everything a rental and make everything a digital rental, and digital rental with an added courseware cost if they can swing it. And so, we're kind of at odds with our publishers, and I don't mind saying it. I mean, they're definitely operating in somewhat monopolistic manners, and outpacing, inflation's already pretty high, but the cost of textbooks and courseware has outpaced inflation by double or triple in the past 60 or 70 years. And so there are real reasons to adopt OER to keep the overall cost down. And one thing that we can say is if there are a lot of OER courses in a major, it's less likely that we're going to have to affix any kind of future course fee for courseware, which our provost has approved in some majors because they were the quote unquote big offenders for the really expensive courseware costs that put us in the red way back in 2020, 2021.
Well, thank you, Mark. I think this has been a great culmination of everything that's been happening throughout the conference. So I hope that people come to the conference in March.
Yeah, check out that link and register if you're interested. If you want more information, there's my email address, so we can leave that up for a couple minutes. I don't know, I found it really freeing to be able to build texts for my courses, for my students in particular, to meet them where they are. But these have all been, massively collaborative efforts. I talk about solo author because I'm the solo person writing or reorganizing most of the chapters, but I'm not the only person doing compliance checks or copywriting or copy editing, excuse me. There are always collaborators on these texts, especially if they're grant funded. If they're grant funded through Carly, you can get a lot of help. I wanted to share a link to this current grant round that the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries of Illinois is having. Yeah, pretty much everybody in here is directly or indirectly affiliated with a Carly library, right? I mean, it's you'd probably have a lot of connections to Carly, but this specifically is going out to librarians and Carly affiliated libraries to apply for OER capacity building at their university, at their college. It's not the kind of thing where you have to author, but you can. This can support authoring, but it's also really worded and geared toward starting up a faculty incentive program or raising awareness. And so, I mean, even if like the smallest thing you do is convince somebody else to to work on a grant out of your library to get a faculty incentive program started. That would be a really successful outcome for this conference and for your effort in attending it with everything else you've got going on in February. In the middle of February, in a massively critical political climate, plus the Olympics, plus there's that. So yeah, I appreciate everyone being here.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again so everyone can be reminded that the recordings of these presentations will be posted at the site under resources and events, and that, oh, said Zoom quit.
You're there.
But I'm still here, right?
Yeah, you're there.
And contact Jeff Newell for more information. Other than that, I would like to.
Okay, we definitely did lose her there. Oh, okay, unmute. You're back, but you're muted, Ellen.
So anyway, I was telling everyone to give you, you can thank Mark in the chat or give him a round of applause in the reactions. This has been a really great conference and a really great way to bring it all together.